I spoke about Turkey's new stance with Joshua Walker. He's a Transatlantic Fellow at the German Marshall Fund.
This is very significant. I mean, less than 6 years ago, we had the Turkish president calling genocide what was happening in that region of the world. Now you have a complete about-face. It really shows you the strategic alignment we're seeing between China and Turkey right now, and really both sides supporting the other in their own fight at home against different terrorist organizations.
Because, as you mentioned a few years ago, relations were somewhat rocky between Turkey and China. Where do things stand right now?
Things have always been a little rocky between the Turkish people and the Chinese, from Genghis Khan onward in some ways. And so this change is very significant, and I think it really bodes well for the future of kind of what this relationship looks like. And don't forget that these are kind of the two polar ends of the Silk Road. You have China on one end representing Asia and the economic power there, and Turkey representing the dynamics of demographics in this region. So these two countries getting along well is not just good for these two countries, it's for everything that goes in between.
Well, you mentioned the Silk Road, Turkey a part of the Belt and Road Initiative, also wanting to join the SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. What is happening here? Is Turkey really pulling away from Europe and going more toward China?
I think in some ways this is basically Turkey beginning to look around its neighborhood 360 degrees and say, look, we've always been on a Western journey from Genghis Khan to Ataturk to going to EU membership, but the Europeans haven't really given us much to hope for, and given the rocky relations we've seen between Europe and Turkey, and quite frankly the United States and Turkey, Turkey's beginning to look around at other players, whether it's Russia and increasingly at China, and saying these are countries that we can get along with. They're not going to ask us about the domestic difficulties we may be having. We're going to focus on economic and security relations, and China has been a good partner in that sense for Turkey.
And when you say economic, I mean, really, with countries participating in the Belt and Road, there's a lot to deal with there, infrastructure, investment. Do you see China and Turkey really working more lockstep with each other when it comes to some of those issues?
Absolutely. I mean, the Belt Road Initiative is huge for Turkey, and whether it's the land route or it's the maritime route, Turkey figures very prominently in that, because you can't really get from China to Europe without some way going through Turkey unless you want to go through Russia, which is a whole different route. And so I think that they are going to work. The problem is, can you get past the history and the cultural questions, which traditionally have kept Turkey and China apart from different parts of the world? I think actually this might be the moment that we see a new initiative beginning to emerge. The question is, how does the West react to that? If Turkey decides to buy missiles or any other security systems from China, will Turkey as a NATO member be able to do that? And what does this mean for China's global engagement more in Turkey's neighborhood?
You mentioned the military. Both countries have planned a high-level military dialogue between the PLA and TSK sometime by the end of the year in Ankara. How important is that as these two countries are looking to further cooperate when it comes to communicating between their militaries and just working together militarily?
I mean, both countries have a long history of militaries having a prominent place within their both society and country and being the kind of strategic actor. The fact that they're cooperating this way, I wouldn't be surprised to see military exercises coming down the line, is going to be very important. And of course, this is not happening in a vacuum. If China is able to do this with Turkey, it has broad significance across NATO, across Europe, and across the United States. So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure in Turkey from its Western allies to say, what are you doing with China? I think everybody in theory is okay with this type of cooperation at the high level. Once you get down to the military cooperation, are we going to see Chinese vessels coming into Turkish waters doing port calls? Are we going to see more infrastructure development? Are we going to see more security cooperation, both fighting terrorism, but also buying military hardware? This is going to be an important space to watch moving forward.
All right, Josh Walker, we appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.